And we are live. Hey guys, this is Ruben from Dub's podcast Connection Loop. Today I have Julian Sado with me, and we're going to get into a topic that not a lot of people are talking about right now, definitely in the corporate world, which is spiritual mindfulness. So behind you, I see, is it a statue of Buddha and katana swords? I don't know. That sounds like a great yin and yang here, a great
Yes,
starting off
yes,
point.
that's funny. You see that. Not a lot of people ask about that, but a lot of people assume. A lot of people assume I'm Buddhist. A lot of people
Yeah.
assume I'm violent. But yeah. So
Yeah,
that's a great answer.
I assumed you just went to Pier One Imports, or
No, actually,
whatever's left of it.
right. No, that's true. It's gone, right? So yeah, everything's online now. Everything's Amazon, if you will.
Yeah. So please start with a little bio of yourself. Love to learn more, and then let's get into this.
Wow, with bios, usually I get really overextended on that, so I'll try to make it short. But
Okay.
basically, bottom line, I grew up in Los Angeles, so college wasn't my focus. It was entertainment industry, so I was heavily involved in entertainment. Been talent agent, worked with Jennifer Lopez before she was J Lo. My cousin's a rapper. I was working with him, Tone Loc. I don't know if anyone's old enough to remember who he was in the '80s with Wild Thing. I became a talent agent, worked with Tracy Spencer and all these other well-known celebrities. Then I really got disenchanted with that and got into kickboxing instructing because I used to be a kickboxer. So ended up building my own empire of kickboxing programs throughout California. Ended up training celebrities, getting back in the entertainment industry, worked with a lot of celebrities. And then I got out of the industry after getting married because I was going to a theological church that basically said that my world was not conducive to marriage. So I got in this life insurance, which it was the worst thing to do when you come from the egocentric place of entertainment and being a fitness trainer and then going into life insurance, trying to talk about if you die, buy my product. I lost all my friends. I was distraught. I was lost. I was wearing dress shoes and suits after, making over six figures, teaching kickboxing on movie sets and stuff. So I was depressed, suicidal. I was suicidal. I tried to commit suicide. Well, I didn't try. I almost did. And then something spiritual happened. And I met Jim Rohn. A lot of people don't know who he is, not the newscaster from sports, but the guy who was a business philosopher. He was kind of like a Zig Ziglar. Just got me really involved in the mind science and pointed me in NLP practitioner, pointed me in behavioral science, and really started talking to me about things that I never heard of before, and introduced me to people that I never thought I would meet. Lived in Sedona, Arizona, who were amazing wordsmiths, but mindful people that focused on things that I'd never heard of. And when I combined that with my theological training, I ended up seeing a difference in the way I thought, and I ended up focusing on NLP and behavioral science, and just continued studying that as I've been in corporate America ever since. So that's my life in a nutshell.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
Yes, I have heard of Tone Loc, and I recently I'll start with the easiest one, and I recently saw him in a Jim Carrey film, and I was
Yeah.
reminded that he
Hey,
was in that in Ace
uh-huh.
Ventura, which I think he
Mhm.
did a really good job in. And he
Yeah.
also has as a drummer, he has one of my favorite fills in a song. So
Okay.
it's a
Okay.
great one.
I'm hearing
I
that song all day in my head now. Thanks, Steve. Yeah.
Yeah, but on a more serious note, I really appreciate the journey, the spiritual journey that you speak of going from a place of the aesthetic to a place of the mindful, and the inner connected to the outward. And I think that's a magnificent process. And I think there's a world where all of these things exist, whether it's
Yeah.
entertainment or expression or art or the movie industry, and also meditation and mindfulness. So it's so nice to hear that evolution that you went through, and that where you landed now, because that's frankly what created you to be who you are right now. So
Exactly.
kudos to you for that process. And what would you say, your catalyst point was? What was that aha moment? You mentioned a couple of spiritual awakenings. I'd like to understand what those were for you.
Well, yeah, the spiritual awakening is really powerful for me. Is when when you're at your rock bottom, it's when your ego is separated from yourself. It's like getting rid of your ego is the key to really understanding what you need. And when you're always focusing on what you want, for your own purposes and own desires, you kind of lose sight of really the spiritual side of life. And I think what happened was I just got so broken where I felt so lost that I didn't have anywhere to turn, but only internal. I mean, it wasn't about my car, it wasn't about who liked me. It was like, I'm lost. I have nowhere to turn. I don't have the answer. And once you realize you don't have the answer, that's when you get the answer. And I think, and that's what, that's where it ties into corporate too, because as leaders, we tend to always want to act like we have the answer or we know. And I almost equate that to an ant. If you look from afar, you look down on a bunch of ants, and this one ant that crawls up on a piece of a tall grass and looks around and says, oh, now I know what life is because I can see everybody from afar, but you're just an ant. You really don't know. You think you know, but not knowing and being humble enough to know that I really don't have the answers is the first place to really be open to learning. I think ego makes us feel like we have to know the answers, and we really don't. And even though we know stuff now, we really don't know, because Newtonian physics was everything for us, and now we have quantum physics, which says no, Newtonian physics doesn't really exist. It's the quantum physics is now the new physics, and that's really what life is now. We realize we are nothing. We're just energy, and even science has proven that, and spirituality has said that for millennia, that we're just energy. We're just waves of energy that create a vibration, and that vibration creates a persona, and people pick that up, just like music, the tone, the beep, beep, boom, boom. That makes you feel something. Well, so do I. Me interacting with you makes you feel something because I have a vibration. And so science is proving that, but every religion has talked about it since the beginning of time, that we are nothing but spirit or energy. So that's what I think. That was my turning point, and I kind of added a little to that. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that one of the most magnificent places to start from is the Socratic thing of all that I know is that I know nothing.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because for Socrates to say that and to have that level of humility with all the things that he knew in the time that he knew them, says a lot. And I think it really speaks to the idea that, we are an open mind and we are an open vessel for information and for what you speak of, which is energy. Mm-hmm. And that ultimately at the end of the day, that is what we're portraying. We are portraying, energy. And I think what a lot of us have done in the business world now, we've tried to find a way to capture what our energy is, what our authentic self is, and to put it out there so that we can have a livelihood, maybe even thrive, but at the same time still have a spiritual connectedness, which I think is one of the hardest things to understand. It's one of the hardest things to communicate because we're just not quite there yet. Fast forward 100 years, human civilization, we're going to have very different conversations about mental energies and spiritual connectedness. So this is like the renaissance. It's like the beginning of this topic. So you're truly at the forefront.
And I was saying this ever since I got into corporate and I started looking at this. And here's what you just said: Socratic way of thinking. Socrates and every Greek philosopher, you can name them. I can go down a list. There's a book called The Hidden Masters that gives you the biography of every Greek philosopher and master. All of them studied Egypt and Mesopotamia knowledge. They went and traveled and then came back and really described the exact same thing in their own words. So it's like, we tend as humans, we actually put an image to everything. We have to tag everything. So if I say spirit or energy, people think I'm a New Age. If I say Holy Spirit, you think I'm a Christian. But we're talking the same thing. It's like agua, water. And we separate that and we say, well, you're a Christian, you're a spiritualist, but we're talking the same exact thing. And so to your point, we also do the same thing with work. We think my work life is different than my spiritual life on Sunday, but you're there in both places. So there's no separation. It's 100% both at the same time. And so that's what people that's what you said. We have this cognitive dissonance of confusion, but it's really because we've gotten a consistency of separating and splicing things when it's really one thing. And I think that's one of the things that's going to happen in the next 10 years. You're already seeing it now. You can type in motivational speaking right now on YouTube, and you're going to get T.D. Jakes and Joel Osteen and all these people who are Christian teachers are now part of the motivational movement, which really you would have never seen that 10 years ago.
And what was that book that you mentioned? I want to make sure I grab it.
It's called Hidden Masters. I don't know the author, but I can send it to you. I don't know the author offhand, but it's a great book, a short biography on every Greek philosopher and what they studied and their philosophy behind why they said what they said.
Amazing. Very cool. And how is it that you kind of apply all of this into your business and your practice right now? What is your flow? What is your process?
Well, people always, whenever you say science is proven, people lean into that. So I use a lot of science. People aren't threatened by science. And so I use a lot of science. I really heavily hone in on neuroscience and behavioral science. And so I tie into like the neurons and basically the way the chemicals run in our body. So I talk about the concept of stress and what that does and what kind of cortisol is populated through the body. And then I tie in the fact that your imagination does not know the difference between real or fake. Just like you'd watch a scary movie and your heart will start palpitating because your subconscious is going to pick up what it feels and it's going to say that's real because it's always there to protect you. So I tie in science and how stress could be as little as I'm late for work to listening to the news, or it can cause stress and it can create cortisol to populate in your body and what that does to you. So I tie in the physical science to the spiritual world. So how do you tap into your subconscious is really understanding what you're actually habitually doing on a daily basis for yourself. We are naturally negative by nature. We tend to look for the negative, but that's human nature to protect ourselves. But if you start walking yourself backwards, you realize the threats that I see as threats aren't threats. They're just experiences. And so I change wording, and that's the NLP in me. I change the wording around where this isn't a problem. This is just an experience. And so I can look at it from a third person. So I teach you how to relieve some of that emotion. And so you can bring down the cortisol and think more rationally. And I teach people how the brain works when they're leading people. Like, for example, a leader will go and talk to their employee and say things like, you have to get this done. I need you to get this done today. Well, every employee sees their leader, no matter who it is, as a parent or a teacher, because our first interaction with people of authority are parents and teachers. We never lose our childhood. Since as old as we get, we'll always have our childhood in front of us. So because of that, there is a threat to that. There is a stress. And then there's an ego that hits with that. And then there's tension. And then that's when you start disliking your job. So how do you say things from a leader perspective that doesn't make you feel like you're threatening them? And as an individual, how do you see your authority that you're being led by, not as a teacher? So I teach people how to change their own psyche so they live their life a little more fuller and not just reactive.
Mm-hmm. And you've written about this. You've authored about this. Yeah. What was that process like? Tell us about your last book.
Well, the book they're talking about going through childhood. That pulled out was something I totally forgot about from a psychology. We say that our bodies, our brain hides us from emotional stress and dangers. And there was a point in my life where my father pulled a shotgun on me when I would ditch school and literally was going to say he was going to kill me with a shotgun. And that was another one of those moments where I put a gun to my head and I wanted to kill myself, but something happened that stopped it. And it was really one of the turning points in my life that changed me from my original first name, and I made the name up Julian, and I've been living by that name ever since. But I talk about the psychology of how that actually reinvented me and helped me become a different person. And so I talk about the science of that, how the brain doesn't know the difference between real and fake. And so when I imagined what I wanted to be, I started emulating behaviors that dictated that. And so most of us live in behaviors of what ifs and what will go wrong. But if you live in a behavior of what I want because I deserve and I'm worthy of it, then your whole life changes. And that's what I talk about in that book.
Wow, that's a process. That's very interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Hey, Margo. Thank you, Margo.
It's deep, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I really want to understand is, when you speak of this idea of, humans start with negativity. I understand what you mean by that. That comes down to survival. Right. That we are constantly trying to protect ourselves from imminent threats, right? Mm-hmm. And that stems from humans in our earliest forms 10,000 plus years ago. And my question for you is pretty simple, is why haven't we and how do we evolve out of that mindset? Because the last time I checked, I don't have imminent threats that are around me.
Yeah.
How do we advance ourselves? Because quite frankly, I'm a little tired of living and watching people around me live I have no problems with fear. Mm-hmm. I think fear is a real thing that exists and we need to understand it and know it. But at the same time, many of us are living in a very finite, survival-based, scarcity mindset. And I think that in my opinion, it's one of our it's one of our biggest sort of holdbacks from spreading our wings and being successful and being happy.
Well, I'm going to say something. This is probably one of the most strangest things I'm going to say, but here's the problem with our society now. And it's not a problem per se. It's just an evolution. If you think about it, there's 700,000 podcasts right now. There's over 700,000. 3.5 billion people are watching Facebook, and YouTube is the number one venue that people watch over TV now. So if you compare that to the past, we had 3 major channels we watched in the past. Now we have everyone, including me, can get on a YouTube channel and say, if you were to apply this 1, 2, 3 steps, you will have everything I have back here. Let's pretend this is not a katana's in a plant, but I have a boat back here. Let's pretend it's a green screen and I say, this is my boat. That's happening on a continual basis. Literally 3.5 billion people see, if I subconsciously do this 1, 2, 3, I will be successful. So what happens is people see that and then they go about their life. And they feel like their life gets mundane, it's repetitive, there's no luster. They come back to home from work, or they're at home every day working and living in the same room, and they're feeling like something's wrong. And they see an average Joe happy and successful. So what happens is that feeling of comparison and I'm not worthy or something's wrong with me is no different than a gun put to my head, because there's a threat of I'm not going to make it. It's still the same threat. And so that creates this, what we call cognitive dissonance in our brain, where we feel like we're not able to get where we want to be because everyone else is there and I'm not, which is still a threat. It's like if you're running in from something and everybody's ahead of you, you're stressed that you're not catching up. That's still a threat. So we're all feeling like we're in comparison mode and we're not worthy to be where everyone else is going. And I just can't figure out how to get there. I don't have the energy. I don't have the time. And it's creating that depression. This is why depression has increased by 400% in our country. So your question was, how do you get past it? You have to be aware of how your subconscious behaves to the things that's in front of it. It has nothing to do with your conscious. It's how your subconscious behaves with the things it sees and feels. And then you have to walk yourself backwards, third person. Like literally, is that true? Is it me? Am I worthy? And you got to go back to why you might not feel worthy, which I had to do. I had to go back to all my little childhood idiosyncrasies and realize these are triggers of survival. These aren't triggers of me. And every cell in my body is renewed and different. So it's not me, it's the past. It's like an old movie. It doesn't affect me anymore. I have memory of it. I call it a scar versus a wound. If it's a scar, I can show you the scar, but I'm not bleeding out anymore. That's okay. But if it's still a wound and I'm bleeding out every time I talk about it, I get angry, then you know there's something there needed to work on. So yes, it's really a self-evident thing. It's not some class you can take. It's a deep study on how it works for you. Just like meditation, there's no one way to do it. You can cross your legs. It might not work. You might not be that flexible. Sit in a chair. There's different ways of doing it. I think people need to realize there is no one way for everyone. Everyone has their own path, and you just got to find yours. And it doesn't happen like a 2-hour movie. It takes a lifetime. Most sages, which is ironic, throughout history, 10 years minimum of study before they said a word about what they learned. Now you can have a guy who can take a class in 3 days. They come out and they're trying to teach and create their own program. So you really have to know it's really about substance and taking time to just do it for yourself and not because you're trying to get something from it. I talk fast. I hope I didn't talk too much there.
No, you're good, man. My question then is, you mentioned connecting to our subconscious. I think what you're referring to is self-realization, knowing thyself, understanding our childhood trauma, to our goals, to our aspirations, to the things that are holding us back, to our friends and our enemies, much of which lives within us. You're talking about self-love. What is it that we can do to actually connect with our subconscious? How do we start that process? If we've never even thought about living in that realm, what's a kickoff point and what's a process?
For me, this sounds great. Reading. You have to read. You have to read things outside of your realm. You got to stop doing the things that you've done habitually. Like if you watch TV every night, change it up. Start reading a book. I really break away from the noise. I have this thing called No-So 24. So every week for 24 hours, I don't watch any news. I don't listen to any music that has words. I don't listen to any TV. Literally just get silent in my own head so I can start hearing my own thoughts. Then you got to start journaling. Journaling is really very important. It's actually more power in actually using a pen and paper, because the brain to actually write creates a certain neuron in the brain that actually infuses it as memory in the brain versus typing. So using old school writing is really important. And reading a book and then applying the things you read versus going to another book right away. Take time to invest in the book you read And I say the books you read are very important too. Don't read, novels about love and, sci-fi, but really read books that have something to do with internal reflection. If you're focused on spirituality, then lean into what you're interested in. Focus on science. I mean, I love psychology, so I love Robert Greene. I love Joe Dispenza because he's in neuroscience and he's also more into the woo as well. He leans in both worlds. Find a person you love to read, and then find that book and apply it. Those are the first things, because you'll see yourself starting to change through those applications. You'll actually lose friends. You'll find yourself not interested in the same people, even the same TV shows. I mean, I was just telling my wife, she was laughing at me because I was giving away all these DVDs. We're moving, and I'm giving away all these DVDs, movies I used to hold dear to. She's like, I said, I can't even watch them anymore. I have no interest because they don't entertain me like they used to. Because as you grow, the things you found dear start looking at, you see it as just stuff. It's nothing you need. So it's really just trying to get more in tune with yourself.
And I'm guessing Bloodsport was in that stack?
Actually, Bloodsport, yes. I have some really funny movies too. There's movies I was in when I was a kid in LA, and I won't even go there. But yeah, I'm getting rid of all those.
Give me the top 3 movies that you're getting rid of, man. I'm just curious.
No. I'm not getting rid of Fast and Furious, and I have a whole thing of that. I mean, those are hilarious movies to me. But I was telling my wife, I love movies like that because of the familia. I mean, for me, my tribe was I never had a family. I was on my own at 15 years old, living in the streets. And I stole from hotels. I would go walk through the lobby, not the lobby, but the hallways. The cleaning ladies had their little cart. I would take their shampoos and towels, and that's how I worked at a gym. So I would go there at 5 a.m, shower and shine and work out. But I lived in my car, which is a Fiat X19, until I was 16. For almost 9 months, I lived in a car and got my first apartment at 16. And I've been on my own ever since. And so so for me, after my father pulled the gun, that's what prompted that. But so me, tribal, having a lack of family was always been this weakness in me. So I've always admired family, like people that are so close that you'll never break that tie. And so I have this thing where I say your struggles become your strength. And that's where I met Raquel. I created a tribe. I have an inner circle meeting every Tuesday morning at 6:30 where we meet. I have people from all over the world, and we're so close because we don't record it. Everybody's free to talk about anything. It's not scripted. We don't know what we're going to talk about, but I tie in science and psychology, and everybody ties in something. But tribal struggle for me as a child was my biggest thing. And so that becomes my biggest desire. And so I've used that to create my own tribe. And so I say that's my biggest movie I won't let go of. I have all the Fast and Furious only because of his love for family. And so I just always appreciate that. I can't believe I just told that out loud.
Hey, listen, the legacy there is truly based on perseverance, and it's based on tribe and family. And I think that these are some of the most important things that we can have right now. They used to say that blood is thicker than water. I have no idea what that means. That means nothing to me anymore.
Scientifically, it is blood is thicker than water. They found out that the heart has 400,000 neurons, neuron-like cells that act like a neuron. They literally are brain-like cells and literally your heart is 5,000 times stronger in electromagnetic energy than your brain. So what you feel, people pick up. And like I said, throughout history, every religion talks about this, and that's where blood is the energy source, because blood, it does carry electromagnetic energy that is so much more powerful through the heart than it is through the brain. So thinking here is one thing, but the emotions carry your desires and also carries out your behaviors. And so that's what's important about understanding how to tap into your subconscious, because that's where your heart really lies. Your true motives lie in your subconscious, basically.
It's amazing that when we can truly understand, chemicals and energy, it's such an amazing starting point to understanding ourselves, and from that, we can truly understand how it all connects to something much larger, which is something that I like to talk about a lot, which is this interconnectedness that we all have.
Yes.
This unified theory that I'm a massive, massive proponent of. And, I try not to get too new agey about it because I think, sometimes it kind of throws people off. But at its core, we are, at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're sharing energy, we're sharing our light, we're sharing our stories with other people, and we're connecting.
So you just said something really funny. You said something really funny. You said people get weird with New Age, but here's the thing. If you go see a comedian, you will pay top dollars to go see a really funny comedian. because they tell stories and
Yes.
they give energy and they use body language. That is picked up and you pick it up, and guess what happens? You start imagining things and then you start laughing, and they can say things that you and I can't say in public in a straight face, but they can say it in a comic way with certain body language and tones and story, and we can embrace it and accept it. And that's power, and that's magic, and that's woo-woo, that's new age. And it's really, we live it every day. We just act like we don't because we put a new word to it. We call it something else, but it's the same thing. Like agua, water. We say the same thing. We just filter it through a different lens so we can accept it. But once we realize we're not, it's no different, then we realize everything's woo-woo, everything's spirituality. No matter what, we're all just vibrational energy that looks solid, that really isn't. Real quick, a really good movie to look at is one called, it was from the 80s, called What the Bleep Do We Know? It's a really old movie, but it was one of the first to really tap into this in the 80s when this started getting really big, getting into the corporate world. And it really was the precursor to corporate buying into mind science, emotional intelligence, and all those kind of things.
What the bleep do we know?
Yeah, what the bleep do we know? New version's called Heal, I think it is, on Netflix. But it really talks about the mind and how the mind, it really, in the heart, what you feel really affects the cellular structure of your body, in your blood, your chemical reaction, and all that creates is cellular growth or construction or restriction. And that is where illness starts, and illness starts with inflammation and stress. Well, stress and inflammation go hand in hand. So it really is a part of our society now, and doctors are starting to pick it up. And doctors are really struggling with it because it really goes against everything they've ever learned. But they're seeing it really is tying into mental and spiritual and physical health all tied into one.
Love that. Final question for you is, what is stress and how do we overcome it?
Great question. And it's really a simple answer. Anything that goes against comfort is stress. Now, stress is not wrong. Stress is how you view it. So put it this way, anything that you deem as something that's discomfortable is probably best to put it this way. Adrenaline and cortisol do the exact same thing to the body. If I'm about to get on the roller coaster and I'm stressed about it, that's okay. That's a fun stress. But I know that I'm coming out of it. It's when stress lingers is the problem. When you say, this always happened to me, or I can never get this out of my head, or these people drive me crazy. And it's like your life is a continuum and not looking at it as a moment and not looking at it that stress is part of life. It's like we tend to think, and I think we've been conditioned to think that it should be easy. This is why methods can take a pill and you'll feel better in 10 minutes. That's modern life, but stress is part of life. You're going to have a headache one day. You're going to have a bad day. You're going to have a good day. So getting over it is realizing it's temporal. You survived everything else in your life. It's just a matter of how you look at it and not think that you're not supposed to have stress. If you live life knowing that one day I'm gonna meet this girl, I'm gonna date her, and we're gonna have some major blowouts, but I'll always be committed no matter what, versus how dare this person do that to me. That is understanding that stress comes with joy. It's part of the life. And so understanding there is no life without stress. Even the richest and the happiest people we see on TV and everything have stress. I was a coach. I still do life coaching. I coach a guy who's very well known. I have non-disclosures agreements, but who is a celebrity. And he's stressed because he has to sing the same song 180 times a year. It's no different than a person driving to work every day, right? The same type of stress. I got to do the same thing over and over. And it's stress, but how he sees it is, feel it, embrace it, and then acknowledge what it is, but realize it will change. And nothing lasts forever, and stop saying it's always happens to me, or, that kind of thing, being negative all the time. So that's how you deal with it. But you really have to look at it for what it is, and what we deem as stress is really not stress. It's really, a lot of it's just discomfort and unpleasantness that we don't want. And that's really changing that concept is the best way to do it.
I really connect to that. I see stress as the interpretation to conflict. There is conflict around us, which is inevitable. That's life. In fact, what we talked about earlier in this conversation is that it helps shape us, who we are as people. Mm-hmm. But the interpretation to that conflict, I think, is where all the beauty and where all the discomfort lies. So
interpretation is key. Totally key. And our interpretation is like we're not supposed to have any stress. That's why this health industry has the biggest sales ever is because we think if I, and it really isn't. You can take a walk and you're exercising. You don't have to, go to the gym. We feel like I have to go to the gym and exercise. You can exercise outside, do some push-ups. You're done. You're doing exercise. You can do your own yard. I have a little pamphlet I wrote, do your own damn yard, lawn. It's because get out and do your own yard. Don't hire somebody. Do it yourself. It's part of relieving stress is exerting energy, getting that BDF to F to populate the brain. Getting that exertion is going to help with the cortisol and bring it down and also create dopamine. So that's the key to getting over stress.
Amazing, man. Where can we learn more about you? I know you're big on LinkedIn, so definitely recommend that connection.
LinkedIn, Julian Sado, because my first name is Fred, but I never use it, but I use it there. And then you go to where my site is called Pivot, the number 2, where it changed. So it's Pivot2Change.com, which is from a boxing term, pivoting to get a different result. So it's Pivot2Change or JulianSado.com, SADO is the best way to find me.
Amazing, man. Thank you so much for your time. This was truly incredible. I really appreciate it.
Well, hey, I woke up at 4 this morning. Well, I'm on the show today, so I was really excited about it as well. So thank you. Thank you so much for letting me be here. So nothing but great things about you. Thanks for your message and what you're doing for everyone out there.
Thanks so much, man. Stick around. I want to keep talking.
All right, sounds good.